The lightning split the sky like the wrath of God himself. And that was when Braden Hutchins saw the crumpled figure lying face down in the mud just beyond his property line. The rain came down in sheets so thick he could barely see his own hands as he jumped from his horse and ran toward what he prayed was not a corpse. The storm had rolled in fast over the Nebraska plains that September evening in 1878, turning the world into a violent wash of water and wind that bent the prairie grass flat against the earth. He knelt beside the figure and turned it over gently, his heart hammering when he realized it was a young woman. Her skin burned hot even through the cold rain, and her breathing came shallow and rapid. Her dark hair plastered to her face, and her clothes were torn and mudded beyond recognition. She did not respond when he called to her, did not open her eyes when he lifted her carefully into his arms. Braden carried her to his horse, struggling to mount while holding her limp form. The animal danced nervously as thunder crashed overhead, but he managed to settle into the saddle and urged the horse toward home. His small ranch sat another mile east, and he pushed the gelding as fast as he dared through the dangerous weather. The woman in his arms felt like she was burning up from the inside, and he knew she did not have much time if he could not get her warm and dry. The cabin came into view through the rain, a modest structure he had built with his own hands after coming to Nebraska 3 years prior. He dismounted quickly, carried the woman inside, and kicked the door shut behind him. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and he laid her carefully on his bed before rushing to build up the flames. Once heat began to fill the small space, he turned his attention back to his unexpected guest. Her clothes needed to come off. There was no way around it. Braden felt his face flush hot despite the situation. He had been raised proper, but propriety would not save this woman from fever and pneumonia. He worked as quickly and respectfully as he could, averting his eyes as much as possible while stripping away the wet, filthy garments. He found blankets and wrapped her in them, then set about warming water and finding clean cloths. As he worked, he studied her face. She could not have been more than 20 or 21 years old, with delicate features and a scattering of freckles across her nose. Even burning with fever and covered in mud, she possessed a striking beauty that made his breath catch. He shook his head, focusing on the task at hand. He dipped a cloth in the warm water and began cleaning the mud from her face and hands. She stirred slightly at his touch, murmuring something incomprehensible. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. Braden leaned closer, trying to make out her words, but they dissolved into fevered nonsense. He wrung out the cloth and pressed it to her forehead, hoping to bring down the terrible heat radiating from her skin. The storm raged outside for hours while Braden kept vigil beside the bed. He changed the cool cloths on her forehead regularly, tried to get water past her lips, and monitored her breathing. Several times she convulsed with chills despite the fever, and he piled more blankets on her, then removed them when the fever seemed to spike higher. He had nursed sick cattle and horses, had even helped his mother through a bad bout of influenza years ago, but he had never felt quite so helpless as he did watching this stranger fight for her life in his bed. Near dawn, the storm finally broke. Pale light filtered through the cabin windows, illuminating the sparse but tidy interior. Braden had not slept, his eyes gritty with exhaustion, but he did not dare leave her side. Her fever still raged, though perhaps not quite as intensely as before. He dipped the cloth again and wiped her face, noting with some relief that her breathing seemed slightly stronger. As full daylight arrived, he finally allowed himself to step outside. The ranch was a mess from the storm, debris scattered everywhere, but his small barn still stood, and his 3 horses had weathered it safely. He fed them quickly and returned to the cabin, half afraid he would find the woman had died in his brief absence. She lay exactly as he had left her, chest rising and falling beneath the blankets. Braden put coffee on to boil and rummaged through his limited food supplies. He had dried beef, beans, some flour, and a few precious vegetables from his garden. He decided to make broth, something she might be able to swallow if she woke. The morning passed slowly. Braden dozed in the chair beside the bed, jerking awake every time she made a sound. Around midday, her eyes finally opened. They were a startling green, confused and unfocused, but open. She looked at him without recognition, her lips moving soundlessly. "Easy now," Braden said softly, leaning forward. "You are safe. I found you in the storm. You have a bad fever." She blinked slowly, her brow furrowing as if trying to make sense of his words. Then her eyes rolled back and she slipped into unconsciousness again. Braden sighed, but took it as a good sign. At least she had woken, even briefly. He managed to get some broth into her over the next few hours, supporting her head while tipping small amounts past her lips. She swallowed reflexively, and he counted that as a victory. As evening approached, he realized he would need to keep this up through another night. His own exhaustion pulled at him, but he refused to give in to it. The second night proved easier than the first. The fever broke around midnight, and suddenly she was drenched in sweat. Braden worked quickly to change the blankets and dry her off as best he could while maintaining her modesty. When he pressed his hand to her forehead afterward, he nearly shouted with relief. The terrible heat had diminished significantly. She slept peacefully after that, her breathing deep and regular. Braden finally allowed himself to collapse in the chair, and within moments he was asleep. He woke to find pale morning light streaming through the windows and green eyes watching him. He sat up quickly, wincing as his neck protested sleeping in the chair. "Hello," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, hoarse and cracked. "My ranch, about 5 miles east of Fort Kearney. I am Braden Hutchins. I found you during the storm 2 nights ago." She closed her eyes, and for a moment he thought she had fallen asleep again. Then she spoke without opening them. "Zara Burton. It is good to meet you, Miss Burton, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Can you tell me what happened to you?" Her eyes opened again, and he saw fear flash through them. "The wagon. We were attacked. Raiders, I think, they killed." Her voice broke and tears slid down her temples into her hair. "They killed my parents, my brother. I just ran." Braden felt his chest tighten. "I am so sorry." She turned her face away from him. "How long have I been here?" 2 days. "You had a bad fever. I was worried you would not make it. Perhaps it would have been better if I had not." "Do not say that." The words came out sharper than he intended, and she flinched. He softened his tone. "I am sorry. I just mean that you are alive and that matters. You are safe here." She did not respond, staring at the rough wooden ceiling. Braden stood, his muscles protesting, and moved to the stove. "You must be hungry. Let me heat some broth." Over the next few days, Zara slowly regained her strength. Braden set up a makeshift bed for himself near the fireplace, giving her privacy in the bedroom area. He helped her sit up to eat, brought her water, and tried not to notice how the simple act of her smiling slightly when the broth tasted good made his heart do strange things in his chest. She told him more about the attack in fragments, the memories clearly painful. Her family had been traveling from Missouri to California, hoping to start fresh after her father lost their farm to debt. They had joined a small wagon train, but had fallen behind when one of their wheels broke. They were trying to catch up when the raiders found them. "I do not know why they let me live," she said one evening as Braden sat beside the bed, mending a torn shirt. I ran into the tall grass and they came after me, but then the storm hit. I just kept running. I do not remember falling. You were about a mile from here when I found you. The fever likely set in from exposure and exhaustion. She was quiet for a moment. You saved my life. Braden felt heat rise in his face. Anyone would have done the same. Would they? She looked at him with those penetrating green eyes. You took me in, cared for me, and did not ask anything in return. Not everyone would do that. He did not know what to say to that, so he focused on his mending. But he felt her gaze on him, and it made his skin warm in a way that had nothing to do with the fire. A week after he found her, Zara was strong enough to get out of bed with assistance. Braden had washed and mended her dress as best he could, though it would never be the same. She was shorter than he had realized, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. She had lost weight during her illness, and the dress hung loose on her frame. "I must look a fright," she said, catching sight of herself in the small mirror he kept by the wash basin. "You look alive. That is what matters." She turned to him with a small smile, the first real one he had seen from her. It transformed her face, lighting it up from within, and Braden felt something shift in his chest. He busied himself with the coffee pot to hide his reaction. "I should ride into Fort Kearney," he said. "Report the attack, see if any other survivors made it there." The light went out of her face. "Yes, of course. I do not want to leave you alone, but I will be fine. I am much stronger now, thanks to you." He made the ride the next morning, leaving her with strict instructions to rest and not overdo it. Fort Kearney was more of a military outpost than a proper town, but it served as a gathering point for settlers and travelers. Braden reported the attack to the Army officers stationed there, describing the location as best he could based on where he had found Zara. A lieutenant listened to his story with a grim expression. "We have had increased raider activity in the area. Mostly deserters and outlaws preying on small groups. We will send a patrol out to investigate, but if this happened during the storm, there may not be much evidence left. The woman I found, Zara Burton, she is the only survivor as far as I know. We will need to speak with her when she is well enough." Braden nodded, though something protective flared in him at the thought of soldiers questioning her. He pushed the feeling aside and purchased some supplies with his limited funds before heading back to the ranch. He found Zara sitting outside the cabin, her face turned toward the afternoon sun. She had braided her dark hair and color had returned to her cheeks. She smiled when she saw him approaching. "You look better," he said, dismounting. "I feel better. The fresh air helps." She stood, wobbling slightly, and he rushed to steady her. His hands on her arms felt natural, right somehow, and when she looked up at him her eyes were soft. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You need to take it slow. You have been through a lot, I know, but I cannot stay in bed forever. And I cannot stay here forever either." The last part came out sad, almost wistful. Braden released her arms, stepping back. "You can stay as long as you need. I reported the attack. The Army will send a patrol." Her expression clouded. "Did they say anything about survivors?" "No, I am sorry." She nodded, having expected as much, but he saw the hope die in her eyes anyway. "What will I do? I have nothing. No family, no money, nowhere to go. You do not have to figure that out today. For now, you are healing. That is enough." Over the following weeks, Zara grew stronger each day, and Braden found himself looking forward to the moments they spent together. She insisted on helping around the cabin despite his protests, starting with small tasks like mending and gradually working up to cooking meals. Her presence transformed his simple bachelor existence into something that felt like a home. They fell into an easy routine. Braden would wake before dawn to tend the horses and check his small herd of cattle. Zara would have coffee ready when he returned, and they would eat breakfast together as the sun rose over the prairie. The conversation started simple, but deepened as they grew more comfortable with each other. She told him about growing up in Missouri, about her mother teaching her to sew and her father teaching her to read. Her brother Samuel had been 16, full of dreams about California and gold and adventure. She spoke of them with tears in her eyes, but also with a smile, as if remembering the good helped ease the pain of losing them. Braden shared his own story. He had grown up in Ohio, the youngest of 4 brothers. His parents still worked their farm there, but Braden had wanted something of his own, a place where he could build something from nothing. He had worked as a ranch hand in Kansas for 2 years, saving every penny, before buying this land and starting his own operation. It was small, just him and his animals and the vast Nebraska sky, but it was his. "Do you get lonely?" Zara asked one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I did not think I did," Braden admitted. "I liked the solitude, the simplicity of it. But now—" He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "But now," she prompted gently. He looked at her, at the way the fading light caught in her hair and made her eyes shine. "Now I think maybe I was lonely and just did not realize it." She held his gaze for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Then she looked away, and the moment broke. The Army patrol returned after 3 weeks with grim news. They had found the wagon, or what was left of it after scavengers and weather had their way. They found graves, shallow ones, likely dug by the raiders themselves for some unknown reason. 5 bodies total. When they gave Zara the few personal effects they had recovered, she wept in a way that broke Braden's heart. He held her while she cried, feeling helpless and angry at the unfairness of it all. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that had turned cruel and chaotic. When her tears finally subsided, she did not pull away immediately, and neither did he. "I am so sorry," he whispered into her hair. "They are gone. They are really gone." Her voice was small, lost. "I know. I have nothing left." He pulled back enough to look at her face, tilting her chin up with his fingers. "That is not true. You have your life. You have strength. You have survived something that would have destroyed a lesser person." "I have nowhere to go, Braden. No family, no money, no prospects. What woman in my position has anything? You have a place here, for as long as you want it." She searched his face. "I cannot stay here forever. People will talk. It is not proper, a single woman living with a single man. Then we will figure something out, but I am not going to turn you out with nowhere to go. That is final." A small smile tugged at her lips despite the tears still wet on her cheeks. "You are a stubborn man, Braden Hutchins, so I have been told." The question of propriety did come up sooner than expected. A neighboring rancher, a man named Thomas Crawford, stopped by a few days later. He was a widower in his 50s with grown children, and he had always been friendly enough to Braden. But the way his eyes lingered on Zara made Braden's jaw tighten. "I heard about the young lady you took in," Crawford said, accepting the coffee Zara offered. "Terrible business, that attack." "It was," Braden agreed shortly. "I also heard she is staying here, with you, alone." Crawford's tone made it clear what he thought of that arrangement. "Miss Burton is recovering from a serious illness and has nowhere else to go." "Well, that is what I wanted to talk to you about." Crawford turned to Zara with what he probably thought was a kind smile. "Miss Burton, I have a large house and a housekeeper who lives on the property. It would be much more proper for you to stay there. I could use help with the household management, and you would have a respectable position." Zara looked at Braden, then back at Crawford. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Crawford, but I am quite content here." Crawford's eyebrows rose. I am not sure you understand the implications, miss. Your reputation, my reputation, is my own concern, Zara said firmly. Mr. Hutchins saved my life and has shown me nothing but respect and kindness. I will not repay that by abandoning him at the first opportunity. Braden felt warmth spread through his chest at her words, at the way she defended him without hesitation. Crawford stood, his expression disapproving. I see. Well, I have made the offer. Should you change your mind, Miss Burton, you know where to find me. He nodded curtly to Braden and left. After he was gone, Zara let out a long breath. I hope I did not overstep, but the way he was looking at me, like I was something he could acquire. You did not overstep, and you are right about Crawford. He is not a bad man, but he tends to see people as assets. Braden paused. But he has a point about the propriety issue. I do not want your reputation damaged. I think my reputation is already quite damaged, considering everything. She smiled sadly. Besides, I meant what I said. I am not leaving unless you want me to. I do not want you to, he said quietly. She met his eyes. Good. As autumn deepened and the prairie grass turned gold, Braden found himself falling for Zara in ways he had never experienced before. It was not just her beauty, though he found her increasingly lovely. It was the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she always saved him the last bit of coffee in the pot. It was the comfortable silences they shared and the deep conversations that lasted long into the night. He tried to ignore his growing feelings, telling himself she had been through too much, that she needed stability and friendship, not complications. But it was getting harder to ignore the way his heart raced when she smiled at him, or the way he found excuses to be near her. Zara seemed to be fighting her own battle. He would catch her watching him sometimes, her expression soft and wondering, but she always looked away when their eyes met. She touched his arm more often, small casual contacts that sent electricity through him. She asked his opinion on things, listened intently when he spoke, and seemed genuinely interested in his dreams for the ranch. One evening in late October, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Zara finally broke the careful distance they had been maintaining. Braden, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you never marry? A man like you with land and prospects, surely you had opportunities. He considered the question, poking at the fire with a stick. I suppose I never found the right person. I was always focused on building something, on working toward a goal. Romance seemed like a distraction from that. And now? He looked at her, at the firelight dancing in her eyes, and decided to risk honesty. Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just waiting to meet someone worth being distracted by. Her breath caught. Braden, I know this is complicated. I know you have been through hell and you are still healing. But Zara, I need you to know that you have become incredibly important to me, more important than I thought anyone could be. She was quiet for so long he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she reached out and took his hand. You have become important to me too. I did not think I could feel this way again after everything. But you make me feel safe. You make me feel like maybe life can be good again. He squeezed her hand gently. It can be. We can make it good together if you want. I want that. I am just scared. Of losing someone else. Of being hurt again. I cannot promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way, but I can promise I will be here, that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy. She moved closer until their shoulders touched. That is enough. That is more than enough. They sat like that for a long time, hands linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. When they finally went to their separate sleeping areas, Braden felt like something fundamental had shifted between them, like they had crossed a line from which there was no going back. The next morning, he woke to find Zara already up, making breakfast. She smiled at him when he emerged, a bright, genuine smile that made him feel like he could accomplish anything. "I was thinking," she said as she set a plate in front of him, "about what Crawford said, about propriety." His stomach sank. "Zara, let me finish. I do not care what people think, truly, but I also do not want to damage your standing in the community. You have worked hard to build something here. I do not care what people think either." She sat down across from him. "Maybe not now, but what about in a year, 5 years? Will you resent me for making your life more difficult? That would never happen." "You cannot know that for certain." She took a breath. "Unless we make our situation more permanent, unless we get married." Braden nearly choked on his coffee. "Married?" she blushed, looking down at her plate. "I know that is very forward of me. I should have waited for you to ask if you even wanted to, but I am practical if nothing else, and it seems like the logical solution to our problem." "Is that the only reason you are proposing? Practicality?" She looked up at him, her eyes shining. "No. I am proposing because I have fallen in love with you, Braden Hutchins. Somewhere between you saving my life and you holding me while I cried and you making me laugh when I thought I would never laugh again, I fell completely in love with you. And if you feel even a fraction of the same, then maybe we could make this work." He stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. "I feel more than a fraction. I feel everything, Zara. I love you so much it terrifies me." Her smile could have lit up the entire prairie. "Is that a yes?" "That is absolutely a yes." He cupped her face in his hands. "But I want to do this right. Will you marry me, Zara Burton? Will you be my wife and my partner and let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy?" "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, yes, yes." He kissed her then, finally closing the distance he had been maintaining for weeks. She melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she laughed. "What is funny?" he asked, unable to stop smiling. "I am engaged. I am standing in a tiny cabin in the middle of Nebraska, engaged to a man I have known for less than 2 months, and I have never been happier." When you put it that way, it does sound a bit mad. The best things usually are. They were married 3 weeks later by a circuit preacher who passed through Fort Kearney. It was a small ceremony with just a few witnesses, including a rather shocked Thomas Crawford, who had the grace to congratulate them sincerely. Zara wore a simple blue dress that Braden had bought her from the general store, and she had woven wildflowers into her hair. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Braden kissed his bride, he felt like his life had finally, truly begun. They settled into married life with surprising ease. Zara took over managing the household while Braden worked the ranch. She had a talent for making do with little, stretching their supplies and finding creative solutions to problems. She also had a head for numbers, and she began keeping detailed records of their expenses and profits. "You know, if we increase the herd by 10 head next spring and the market holds steady, we could potentially double our profit," she said one evening, showing him her calculations. Braden stared at the neat columns of numbers. "How did you figure all this out?" "My father taught me bookkeeping. He said a woman should be able to manage money as well as any man." Her expression grew sad for a moment, but then she pushed it aside. "The point is, we could really build something here, Braden. Make this ranch into something significant." "We," he repeated, loving the sound of it. "I like that word," she smiled. "I do too." Winter arrived with a vengeance, bringing bitter cold and heavy snow. Braden had worried about how Zara would handle her first prairie winter, but she proved as resilient as ever. She kept the cabin warm and comfortable, prepared hearty meals, and found ways to keep them entertained during the long, dark evenings. They talked for hours, sharing their dreams and fears, learning every detail about each other. Braden told her about the ranch he wanted to build, about raising horses and cattle, about maybe one day having enough success to help other settlers get their start. Zara shared her love of reading, her secret dream of maybe teaching someday if the area ever got a proper school. "We could build the school," Braden suggested. "If the ranch does well enough, if we get more settlers in the area, we could donate land and materials." "You would do that? Why not? A community needs a school. Our children will need a school." She blushed at the mention of children, but her eyes lit up. "I like the sound of that, our children. How many do you want?" "I do not know. 3, 4, enough to fill this cabin with noise and laughter." He pulled her close. "That sounds perfect." The intimacy of marriage brought them even closer. Braden had been nervous at first, worried about doing things right, but Zara met him with equal parts shyness and eagerness. They learned each other slowly, tenderly, building something beautiful in the privacy of their cabin while the snow fell outside. Spring arrived with mud and rain and newborn calves. Zara threw herself into ranch work with enthusiasm, helping deliver calves, mending fences, and even learning to ride well enough to check on the herd. She proved to have a natural way with animals, and the horses responded to her gentle touch. "You are a natural rancher," Braden told her one evening as they watched the sunset together. "I never imagined this life for myself, but now I cannot imagine anything else. No regrets about marrying a poor rancher." She turned to him, her expression serious. "My only regret is all the time I did not know you. I lost my family, Braden, and that will always hurt. But you gave me a new family. You gave me a home and a purpose and love beyond what I thought possible. I would choose this life, choose you, 1,000 times over." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Zara Hutchins. I love you too." Summer brought prosperity. Their hard work paid off with a successful cattle sale that allowed them to expand the herd and make improvements to the cabin. They added a second room, built a proper barn, and even installed glass windows that Zara had particularly wanted. They also discovered that Zara was pregnant. She told him on a warm August evening, her face a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I am fairly certain. All the signs are there." Braden felt like his heart might burst from happiness. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "We are having a baby," he said, still not quite believing it. "We are having a baby," she confirmed. "Are you happy?" "I know we have only been married a few months. I am incredibly happy. Scared too, but happy." He set her down gently, his hand going to her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a wonderful father." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Zara dealt with morning sickness that she insisted on calling all-day sickness. Braden fussed over her constantly, trying to make her rest more, but she refused to be treated like an invalid. "I am pregnant, not dying," she said after he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I know, but you need to be careful." "I am being careful, but I also need to keep living my life. The ranch does not run itself." They compromised, with Zara doing lighter tasks while Braden took on more of the heavy work. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They spent evenings planning for the baby, discussing names and dreaming about the future. One night in early autumn, almost exactly a year after Braden had found her in the storm, Zara pulled out a trunk she had kept tucked away. "I want to show you something," she said. Inside were the few items recovered from her family's wagon. A photo of her parents on their wedding day. Her mother's Bible. A small wooden horse her brother had carved. She touched each item reverently. "I used to cry every time I looked at these, but now I can remember them with more happiness than pain. I will never stop missing them, but I do not feel guilty anymore for surviving, for being happy." Braden put his arm around her. They would want you to be happy. I know, and I am. I am so deeply, completely happy. She looked up at him. Thank you for finding me in that storm. Thank you for not giving up on me when I was fevered and broken. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for choosing this life with me. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand on her swollen belly. Our child will know their grandparents through stories, and they will grow up knowing love and safety and hope. They will have everything we can give them. Their son was born in March of 1880, arriving with strong lungs and a full head of dark hair. Zara labored through the night with the help of a midwife from Fort Kearney, and Braden paced outside until he heard the baby's first cry. When the midwife finally let him in, he found Zara exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle. "Meet your son," she said softly. Braden approached on shaky legs, looking down at the impossibly small face. The baby had Zara's nose and what looked like it might be Braden's chin. Tiny fingers curled into fists and dark blue eyes blinked up at him. "He is perfect," Braden whispered. "You want to hold him." With careful instruction from Zara, Braden took his son into his arms for the first time. The baby was so light, so fragile, and Braden felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I am your father, and I promise I am going to do everything I can to give you a good life." "What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definite. But now, looking at his son, Braden knew, "Samuel, after your brother, if that is all right with you." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. "Samuel, yes, Samuel Hutchins, it is perfect." Life with a newborn was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Samuel proved to be a demanding baby, wanting to be held constantly and waking frequently during the night. But neither Braden nor Zara minded. They took turns walking him, soothing him, marveling at every tiny noise and movement. As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. Word had spread about Braden's fair dealing and quality cattle, and business improved steadily. They were able to hire help occasionally, and Braden began planning for future expansion. More settlers arrived in the area, and the community around Fort Kearney grew. A proper town began to take shape, with a general store, a church, and even talk of a school. Braden and Zara became active members of the community, attending church services and social gatherings, always bringing young Samuel along. Zara proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even during difficult moments. She sang to Samuel constantly, old songs her mother had taught her, creating new memories while honoring old ones. Braden would often come in from working to find her rocking their son and singing, and the sight never failed to fill him with contentment. "You know what I realized today?" Zara said one evening as they sat outside watching the sunset, Samuel sleeping in her arms. "What is that?" 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything. I was ready to die in that storm, and now look at me. I have a husband I adore, a beautiful son, a home I love, and a future full of possibility. Life is strange and wonderful." "It is," Braden agreed. "Finding you was the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I was half dead and delirious with fever, especially then, you needed me and I needed you, even though I did not know it yet," she smiled. "Fate works in mysterious ways. I do not know about fate. But I know I would go through that storm 1,000 times if it meant finding you at the end." Samuel stirred in Zara's arms, making little snuffling noises before settling back into sleep. They watched him in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about how much their lives had changed. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Samuel grew into a lively toddler who kept them constantly busy. The ranch continued to prosper, allowing them to build a larger house with separate bedrooms and a real kitchen. They acquired more land, expanded their herd, and hired 2 full-time ranch hands. Zara gave birth to twin daughters when Samuel was 3. The birth was difficult, frightening Braden badly, but Zara proved as strong as ever. The girls, whom they named Lily and Rose after Zara's grandmother and mother respectively, were tiny but healthy. 3 children, Braden said in wonder, looking at his sleeping daughters while Zara rested. "We have 3 children." "We do," Zara said tiredly but happily. "Are you overwhelmed?" "Completely, but in the best way possible." Life became even more chaotic with the twins. Between ranch work and 3 small children, Braden and Zara barely had time to breathe. But they managed, supporting each other through sleepless nights and difficult days, always finding moments to reconnect and remember why they were doing this. The community continued to grow, and true to his word, Braden donated land and materials for a school. Zara volunteered to teach part-time once the children were older, fulfilling her dream while also contributing to the community's development. Samuel grew into a responsible young boy who loved helping his father on the ranch. The twins were inseparable, getting into twice as much trouble as any single child could manage. The house was loud and messy and full of life, exactly as Zara had wished. On quiet evenings, after the children were asleep, Braden and Zara would sit together on the porch of their house, watching the prairie grass wave in the wind. Sometimes they talked about their days, their plans, their dreams. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, grateful for the life they had built together. "You ever think about that night?" Zara asked one such evening. "The storm." "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I had taken a different path home. If I had missed seeing you in the mud, if the fever had been too strong. I try not to think about those things. They scare me too much." He squeezed her hand. "But they did not happen. I found you. You survived. We found each other. We did." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think surviving was enough, just making it through each day. But you taught me that life can be so much more than survival. It can be beautiful and full and worth every hard moment. You taught me that too. Before you, I was just existing, working, sleeping, working some more. I did not know what I was missing until I found you." They sat like that as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Inside, they could hear the faint sounds of the children settling for sleep, the soft footsteps of their housekeeper moving through the rooms. It was a full life, a good life, better than either of them had dared to dream. Years continued to pass, bringing more changes. The town near Fort Kearney grew into a proper settlement with multiple businesses and a real main street. The school thrived under Zara's part-time teaching and a full-time teacher they had helped recruit. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, known for quality livestock and fair business practices. Samuel turned 13 and took on more responsibilities around the ranch. The twins, now 10, were bright students who loved learning and constantly tested their parents' patience with their schemes and adventures. Braden hired more help, allowing him to spend more time with his family while still managing the operation successfully. One day in late autumn, Braden came home to find Zara sitting at the kitchen table with tears streaming down her face. He rushed to her side, heart hammering with fear. "What is wrong? Are you hurt?" The children are fine. Everyone is fine." She wiped at her tears, laughing slightly. "I am being silly. Tell me what is going on." She gestured to an open letter on the table. "I received a letter from a lawyer in Missouri. Apparently, my father had a distant cousin I never knew about. She passed away recently and left me a small inheritance. Nothing substantial, but it is enough to." She trailed off, overcome with emotion again. Braden picked up the letter, scanning it quickly. The cousin had left Zara some money and a collection of family photographs and documents. "This is wonderful," he said, though he was not sure why she was crying. "The photographs," Zara managed. "There are photographs of my parents from before I was born, of their families, history I thought was lost forever. And the money, Braden, she left enough that we could help other families like mine, people who lost everything and need a fresh start." Understanding dawned. "You want to use the inheritance to help settlers. Would that be all right?" "I know we could use it for the ranch or save it for the children," but he pulled her into his arms. "It is your inheritance. You can use it however you want, and I think helping others is exactly what we should do." She pulled back to look at him. "We could set up a fund. Help families who arrive with nothing. Give them supplies, maybe even small loans to get started. We could make a real difference." "Then that is what we will do." They established the Burton Family Fund, named after Zara's parents and brother. It started small, helping a few families each year with supplies and small amounts of money to help them get established. But word spread, and soon they were working with the church and other community members to expand the program. Zara threw herself into the work, interviewing families, assessing needs, and distributing help. She had a talent for identifying which families would make the best use of assistance, and her judgment proved sound time and again. Families they helped often became successful members of the community, contributing back as they were able. "You are doing something important," Braden told her one evening after she had spent the day working with a newly arrived family. "We are doing something important," she corrected. "I could not do this without your support. Still, you are taking your tragedy and turning it into hope for others. That takes strength. I learned from the best." She kissed him softly. "You took a broken, fevered stranger and turned her into someone who believes in hope again." This is just paying that forward. Their children grew and thrived. Samuel showed a natural talent for ranching and a good head for business. He talked about taking over the ranch someday, expanding it further, maybe even breeding horses in addition to cattle. The twins remained inseparable, both showing academic promise that suggested they might pursue education beyond what the local school could provide. When Samuel turned 18, Braden officially made him a partner in the ranch operation. The young man had earned it through years of hard work and smart decisions. He had his mother's head for numbers and his father's way with livestock, a combination that served the business well. The twins, 16 now, had different dreams. Lily wanted to be a teacher like their mother. Rose had her heart set on becoming a doctor, an ambitious goal for a woman but one that Braden and Zara supported fully. "Times are changing," Zara said when Braden expressed worry about how difficult Rose's path would be. "Women are going to college now, becoming professionals. If our daughter wants to be a doctor, we will find a way to make it happen. You are right, I just worry about her facing discrimination and hardship. She is our daughter. She is strong enough to handle it. We raised her to be, and she was right." All their children possessed strength and determination, shaped by parents who believed in them and a community that supported them. As their children grew into adults and began making their own ways in the world, Braden and Zara found themselves with more time for each other again. They took long rides across the prairie, revisiting the places that had been significant in their life together. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset, just as they had done for years. "You remember the first time I made you laugh?" Zara asked one such evening. They were both in their 40s now, graying at the temples but still fit and healthy. Braden thought back. "I think it was about 2 weeks after I found you. You tried to help me fix the barn door and it fell on both of us. We ended up in a heap in the mud and you just started laughing. I could not help it. You looked so offended, like the door had personally insulted you." She giggled at the memory. I remember thinking that if I could still laugh after everything that had happened, maybe I could survive after all. You did more than survive. You thrived. We thrived. We did. She squeezed his hand. I was thinking we should take a trip, just the two of us. Maybe visit some of the places we have always talked about seeing. What about the ranch? Samuel is more than capable of running things for a few weeks, and the girls are old enough to look after themselves. We should do this while we are still young enough to enjoy it. So they did. They traveled to Denver and San Francisco, marveling at how much the West had changed since they had first arrived in Nebraska. They saw the ocean for the first time together, standing on a beach in California and watching the waves crash against the shore. "It is beautiful," Zara breathed, the sea wind whipping her hair. "But I still prefer our prairie." "Me too, though this is nice to visit." They returned home refreshed and even more appreciative of the life they had built. The ranch was thriving under Samuel's management. Lily was teaching at the local school, following in her mother's footsteps. Rose was preparing to leave for medical school back east, nervous but determined. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Braden and Zara reduced their direct involvement in the ranch, trusting Samuel to handle day-to-day operations while they focused on the Burton Family Fund and community work. They helped establish a library, supported the church, and worked with newer settlers to help them establish themselves. Samuel married a smart, capable young woman named Margaret, and they began building their own life on a portion of the ranch land. Within a year, Braden and Zara became grandparents to a healthy baby girl. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, Braden felt the same fierce protectiveness and overwhelming love he had felt when Samuel was born. "We are grandparents," he said to Zara later, still marveling at the idea. "We are. And Samuel is a father. Time moves so quickly." "It does. But I would not change a moment of it." She smiled at him, the same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "Neither would I." More grandchildren followed as their children married and started families of their own. Lily married a fellow teacher and had 2 sons. Rose, against all odds and expectations, became one of the first female doctors in the state and eventually married a fellow physician. She had 1 daughter whom she raised to be just as determined and capable. The ranch expanded under Samuel's management, becoming one of the largest and most successful operations in Nebraska. The Burton Family Fund helped dozens of families over the years, some of whom became successful ranchers and business owners themselves. The community they had helped build thrived, growing from a scattered collection of settlers into a proper town with all the amenities of civilization. Through it all, Braden and Zara remained partners in every sense of the word. They supported each other through aging parents' deaths, through the challenges of growing older, through the joys of watching their children and grandchildren flourish. They took walks every evening when weather permitted, still holding hands like young lovers. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and laughter, just as Zara had once dreamed. Samuel gave a toast, speaking about his parents' partnership and love serving as an example for them all. "My father found my mother during a terrible storm," Samuel said, raising his glass. "She was fevered and broken, having lost everything, but he did not see a burden. He saw someone worth saving, and she, in turn, saved him from a lonely life he did not even realize he was living. They built something beautiful together, not just this ranch, but a family and a community. They showed us all what real love looks like." Braden looked at Zara, seeing tears shine in her eyes. He squeezed her hand and she squeezed back, both remembering that stormy night so many years ago. Later, when the guests had gone and they sat alone on their porch, Zara leaned her head on Braden's shoulder. 25 years, she mused. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had not found me? Sometimes. But I cannot imagine it being better than this. Can you? No. Even with all the pain and loss, even with all the hard times, I would not change anything. This life with you has been everything I never knew I needed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie they both loved. The ranch stretched out before them, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. In the distance, they could see Samuel's house, lights glowing warmly in the windows. Somewhere back east, Rose was saving lives. In town, Lily was shaping young minds. Their grandchildren were growing, learning, becoming their own people. "We did good," Braden said softly. "We did," Zara agreed. "We took a tragedy and turned it into something beautiful." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Braden thought about how much had changed since that stormy night in 1878. He had been alone then, content with his solitary life, not knowing what he was missing. Then he found Zara, fevered and broken in the mud, and everything changed. He had nursed her back to health, watching her grow stronger each day. And with each day, he had fallen deeper in love with her strength, her resilience, her capacity for joy despite everything she had endured. She had transformed his house into a home, his existence into a life worth living. Now, decades later, sitting beside the woman who had become his whole world, Braden felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the storm that brought her to him, for the strength that kept her alive, for every moment they had shared since. "I love you," he said, the words as true now as they had been the first time he spoke them. "I love you too," Zara replied, snuggling closer. "Always and forever." The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable challenges of aging. Braden's joints grew stiff, and Zara developed a slight tremor in her hands. But they aged together, supporting each other through each new limitation, finding ways to adapt and continue enjoying life. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 35th. The ranch passed fully to Samuel's management, though Braden still offered advice when asked. Zara reduced her teaching to occasional storytelling sessions for the youngest students, who loved hearing about the old days. Their grandchildren began having children of their own, making Braden and Zara great-grandparents. The family tree they had started with their marriage had grown branches and roots throughout the community. Everywhere they went, they saw the impact of their lives and choices. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Zara moved more slowly than usual. Braden noticed immediately. "Are you feeling all right? Just tired? It has been a long day." She smiled at his concern. "Do not fuss, I am fine." But the next morning she did not get up at her usual time. Braden woke to find her still in bed, her breathing shallow and her color poor. Terror gripped him. "Zara, Zara, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open. "I am sorry. I feel so weak." He sent for the doctor immediately, his heart pounding with fear he had not felt in years. Samuel arrived within minutes of being summoned, his face tight with worry. The doctor examined Zara carefully, his expression grave. "Her heart is failing. At her age, there is not much to be done except keep her comfortable." "No," Braden said flatly. "There has to be something. Medicine, treatment, anything." "I am sorry, Mr. Hutchins. The best thing you can do is make sure she is not in pain and that she is surrounded by family." Braden refused to accept it at first, but Zara took his hand weakly. "It is all right," she whispered. "We knew this day would come eventually. Not yet, not now, we have more time. We have had a lifetime together, a beautiful, full lifetime." She smiled at him. I am not afraid, Braden. How can I be when I am so grateful for everything we have shared? The family gathered, filling the house once more. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to say goodbye to the woman who had been the heart of their family. Zara spoke to each of them, sharing words of love and wisdom until exhaustion overtook her. Only Braden remained in the room as night fell. He held her hand, watching her breathe, memorizing every line of her face. "You remember what I promised you?" he asked softly. "That first night we talked about our feelings. That you would be here," she whispered. "That you would keep me safe and happy. I meant it, every word. I know, and you kept your promise. You gave me everything, Braden, everything and more. You gave me everything too, a home, a family, a purpose, a love beyond measure." She squeezed his hand weakly. "Promise me something." "Anything. Keep living after I am gone. Do not just exist. Keep living and loving and finding joy. Promise me." Tears ran down his face. "I promise." "Good." Her eyes drifted closed. "I am so tired." "Then rest. I am here. I will always be here." Her breathing grew slower, more peaceful. Braden held her hand and told her stories of their life together, reminding her of all the beautiful moments they had shared. He told her about finding her in the storm, about nursing her back to health, about falling deeper in love with her each day. He reminded her of their wedding, of holding Samuel for the first time, of every sunset they had watched together. As dawn light began filtering through the windows, Zara took one last peaceful breath and was gone. The grief was crushing, worse than anything Braden had ever experienced. She had been his partner for nearly 40 years, his best friend, his love, his everything. The world felt hollow without her in it, but he remembered his promise. "Keep living," she had said. So he tried. Samuel and his family moved into the main house, insisting that Braden should not be alone. His children and grandchildren visited constantly, making sure he ate and slept and continued to care for himself. They shared memories of Zara, keeping her alive in their stories and their hearts. Braden continued his daily walks, though now he walked alone. He visited Zara's grave every day, sitting beside it and talking to her as if she could hear. He told her about the family, about the ranch, about the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. One evening, about a year after Zara's death, Braden walked out to the spot where he had found her all those decades ago. The prairie grass waved in the breeze, just as it had that stormy night. He stood there for a long time, remembering the moment that had changed his life forever. "I found you right here," he said aloud, though there was no one to hear. "You were fevered and barely alive. I did not know then that saving you would mean saving myself too. I did not know that the woman I nursed back to health would become my entire world." The wind rustled the grass, and for a moment Braden could almost feel her beside him. "I kept my promise," he continued. "I am still living, still finding moments of joy, but I miss you. Every single day I miss you." He stood there until the sun set, then slowly walked back to the house. Samuel and Margaret were getting dinner ready, and his grandchildren were playing in the yard. It was not the same without Zara, would never be the same, but it was still good, still worth living for. Braden lived another 5 years, staying active and involved in the family and community. He told stories about Zara constantly, making sure the younger generations knew about her strength and kindness. He continued supporting the Burton Family Fund, helping families just as he and Zara had done together. When his time finally came, he went peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. They buried him beside Zara, reuniting them in death as they had been in life. Their legacy lived on through their children and grandchildren, through the ranch they had built, through the community they had helped establish, through the countless families they had helped over the years. The Burton Family Fund continued for generations, always helping those who needed a fresh start. And sometimes, on stormy nights, people swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the prairie, forever together, forever in love. The rancher who had found a fevered woman in a storm and nursed her back to health, falling deeper in love with her each day. The woman who had lost everything but found a new life, a new love, and built something beautiful from tragedy. Their story became legend in the community, told and retold as an example of how love can transform lives, how kindness can change the world, how even in the darkest moments, hope and healing are possible. Young couples starting their lives together look to Braden and Zara's example, aspiring to build the same kind of partnership and devotion. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each successive owner honoring the foundation that Braden and Zara had laid. The house they had built and expanded over the years stood strong, sheltering their descendants and keeping their memory alive. Photos of them hung on the walls, showing their progression from young newlyweds to elderly partners, always side by side, always clearly in love. The Burton Family Fund grew into a full foundation, helping hundreds of families over the decades. It became a model for similar programs throughout the West, proving that compassion and practical assistance could make real differences in people's lives. Every family helped through the fund learned the story of how it began, of Zara's loss and her determination to turn tragedy into hope. The town that had grown around Fort Kearney eventually erected a small monument in the town square, honoring early settlers who had shaped the community. Braden and Zara's names were engraved there, along with a brief description of their contributions. But their real monument was all around the living community they had helped build, the thriving families descended from them, the traditions of kindness and generosity they had established. Samuel ran the ranch successfully until his own sons were ready to take over, continuing the cycle. He often told his children about the night his grandfather found his grandmother in the storm, about the love story that had started his family line. He made sure they understood the values their grandparents had lived by, the importance of hard work and compassion, and never giving up on people. Lily's teaching career influenced hundreds of students over the years. She incorporated her mother's storytelling techniques and her father's practical wisdom into her lessons, shaping young minds just as her parents had shaped the community. Her sons became educators as well, carrying on the family tradition. Rose broke barriers as one of the first female doctors in the state, paving the way for other women to enter the profession. She credited her courage to her parents' example, to watching her mother overcome impossible odds and build a new life. She treated countless patients over her long career, always remembering her father's kindness in caring for her fevered mother all those years ago. The great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing stories about Braden and Zara, about the storm and the fever and the love that grew from such dark beginnings. The stories took on an almost mythical quality over time, but the core truth remained. Two people had found each other against all odds, had built something beautiful together, and had left the world better than they found it. On the anniversary of the day Braden found Zara, the family established a tradition of gathering at the ranch. They would share a meal, tell stories, and walk out to the spot where it all began. Standing in the prairie grass, they would raise a toast to the couple who had started it all, honoring their memory and their legacy. The storms still came to the Nebraska plains, as they always had and always would. But now, when the lightning split the sky and the rain fell in sheets, the people who lived on what had once been Braden Hutchins' small ranch remembered a different storm. They remembered how tragedy could turn to hope, how a fevered stranger could become a beloved wife, how nursing someone back to health could mean falling deeper in love each day. And in that remembering, Braden and Zara lived on, their love story eternal, their impact immeasurable, their legacy of kindness and courage continuing to inspire long after they were gone. They had proven that even in the wildest, harshest places, even after the worst losses, love could flourish and build something lasting. That was their gift to their family and their community, a gift that would endure for generations to come. The prairie grass continued to wave in the wind, the seasons continued to turn, and the ranch continued to thrive. And somewhere in the vast Nebraska sky, two souls were together again, watching over the life they had built and the love they had shared, forever intertwined, forever whole, forever home.